In a world ruled by fear and mystery, every whispered superstition could mean the difference between life and death. Uncover the terrifying beliefs that shaped medieval existence. A low, restless wind murmurs through the skeletal branches of an ancient oak, its gnarled limbs clawing at the thick mist that settles like a shroud over the village's crooked rooftops. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth, mingled with the acrid sting of burning tallow, a smell that curls and coils through narrow lanes where timber-framed houses lean on one another as if for protection. Each crooked beam and frost-cracked window tells a story of winters endured, of whispered prayers, of eyes that watch from shadows too old to remember their origin. The villagers move like ghosts, their footsteps muffled against mud hardened by frost, their voices scarce and guarded. Words are chosen with the care of a blade's edge, for in this place, a careless syllable might invite the gaze of unseen watchers. They clutch charms fashioned from iron, twisted into rings, from bleached bone carved with symbols passed down through forgotten tongues. These talismans are more than superstition. They are armor against the night's encroaching dread, a fragile barrier between flesh and shadow. Children, eyes wide and haunted, dart through the alleys, their glances flickering toward the black cat that slips silently between houses, a silent sentinel with eyes gleaming like embers from a fire long dead to the villagers. Such creatures are neither friend nor foe, but messengers from the borderlands between worlds, neither fully alive nor fully dead, bearing secrets no one dares to speak aloud. The cat's passage is marked by the sudden hush that falls, the breath caught in throats, as if the air itself holds its silence in fear. Behind shuttered doors, families huddle close to hearths whose flames dance nervously, flickering shadows on faces etched with worry and years of loss. The crackle of burning wood is a reminder that warmth is fleeting, just as life itself hangs by a thread. When a candle sputters and dies, a silent prayer is uttered, for the extinguishing of light is never random, but a summons from the depths, an invisible judgment passed down by powers older than kings and clergy. Here, superstition is no mere folly, it is survival, writ in ritual and fear. Each action, each knock on wood, each crossing of fingers, each whispered invocations, a stave against chaos, a defense against the creeping cold that seeks to swallow the soul whole. The village exists beneath a veil, thin as a widow's mourning veil, trembling with every creak of shutter, every toll of the distant bell, marking the passing of yet another soul lost to the unrelenting darkness. Among the villagers, stories pass in half-spoken murmurs, tales of witches whose shadows twist beneath the moon, of spirits that linger where crosses have rotted and stones have sunk. The border between the living and the dead is a breath away, a fragile threshold where a slip might mean being claimed forever by something that moves unseen through the night. The village's silence is a fortress, the unspoken rules a pact with fear itself. In this world, the wind carries more than cold. It carries judgment. The sudden gust that snuffs a candle, the unexplained chill that creeps along a spine, the flicker of movement just beyond vision, all these are reminders that the village stands on the edge of something ancient and inexorable. To cross into the shadows without protection is to invite a fate harsher than any earthly punishment. The elder woman's gnarled hands trace the iron pendant hanging from her neck, a relic forged in desperation, forged with prayers for mercy. Her eyes, dim but fierce, scan the horizon beyond the trees, where the mists gather thicker, where the boundary blurs between what is and what should never be. Her breath rises in soft clouds, and she knows that the fragile balance they cling to could shatter with a single misstep. A child's quiet sob breaks the stillness, a sound swallowed almost immediately by the wind. The sorrow is old here, a river running deep beneath the village bones. The black cat pauses at the corner of the street, eyes catching the faintest glint of moonlight, then slips away, disappearing into the veil that separates this world from the next. It is a silent witness to the suffering, a guardian of secrets too heavy for human tongues. As night deepens, the village exhales a breath held tight all day. The restless wind murmurs its ancient song once more, threading through the skeletal oak, brushing past the shuttered windows, and settling over the stone and wood with a cold that feels like judgment itself. Somewhere beyond the mist, something watches, waiting for the unwary to cross the veil. The candle flame rekindles faintly in the hearth, a fragile beacon against the dark. Yet, for all the fire's warmth, the chill remains an echo of the shadows that linger at the edges of sight, a reminder that in this place, superstition is not simply belief. It is a pact with fear, a shackle to the unknown, a thread of hope spun thin between survival and surrender. And so, beneath the heavy sky and the ancient trees, the village holds its breath, poised between worlds, where every whisper, every glance, every shadow might be the first step into something older and darker than any mortal law. What waits beyond the veil? What price will be paid by those who dare to listen to the wind's restless murmur? The answers lie in the silence that follows. And the next chapter beckons where shadows lengthen, and the line between life and death grows ever more fragile. In the half-light of dawn, frost clings to the uneven cobblestones, glinting like shards of glass beneath the worn leather boots of a priest making his slow, deliberate way toward the village chapel. The cold bites sharp, and the brittle air carries the mingled scents of ancient stone and smoldering incense, a fragrance thick with prayer and fear, hanging suspended like a fragile thread stretched taut between two worlds. The village breathes in the chill, its people gathered outside in trembling clusters, their forms cloaked in fur-lined hoods, faces pale as the frost itself, etched with the silent language of dread and hope intertwined. Their voices, if they rise at all, are whispers swallowed by the restless wind. 4 words spoken too loudly might draw the gaze of those unseen cursed spirits, witches, and the restless dead who slip through the thin veil that separates night from dawn. The villagers know that today is unlike any other. The church bell, ancient and heavy, will toll 3 times each peal, a summons to the heavens and a plea for protection against the dark forces pressing ever closer, waiting just beyond the fragile boundary of mortal life. The priest's hands, cracked and knotted like the gnarled branches of the ancient oak standing sentinel outside the village, clutch a rusted iron key. It is a relic steeped in lore, said to lock the gates between life and death itself, to seal away the curses that poison the land and the restless souls who wander without peace. His steps echo softly against the stone walls of the chapel as he crosses the threshold, entering a space where flickering candlelight casts long, wavering shadows that dance like whispered secrets across ancient wooden beams. Inside, the chapel is steeped in silence, thick with the weight of unspoken fears and the power of long-forgotten rituals. The scent of melted wax and old smoke lingers like a memory, wrapping the space in a cloak of solemnity. The villagers' hopes and terrors hang in the air, mingling with the rising smoke as the priest prepares to ring the bellinact that is both sacred and desperate, a fragile shield against the invisible terrors that lurk beyond the hearth's glow and within the deepest recesses of the human heart outside. The village holds its breath, each soul poised on the razor's edge between despair and faith. Mothers clutch children closer, elders bow their heads in silent prayer, and the youngest dare not meet the eyes of those who speak of curses as though they were old friends. The bell's toll will be their heartbeat, marking time in a world where seconds stretch long and the shadow of death lingers just beyond sight. As the first peal sounds, it reverberates through the frozen streets, a deep and solemn cry that shakes the frost from the branches overhead. The sound seems to pierce the very air itself, reaching into the hidden places where the dark forces stir, a warning and a ward in one. With each successive toll, the villagers draw tighter into themselves, their prayers growing more fervent, their hope more fragile. The bell does not merely ring, it speaks in the ancient tongue of fear and protection, weaving a tapestry of sound meant to hold the darkness at bay. Within the chapel, the priest moves with reverent care, turning the key in an iron door whose rusted hinges protest with a slow, mournful groan. The lock is said to guard more than wood and stone. It seals a doorway to realms beyond human reckoning. To open it is to touch the boundary between life and death, to invite into this world the echoes of what should remain forever lost. The priest's breath hitches as the lock clicks, the sound swallowed by the thick air as if the chapel itself holds its breath. The villagers listen, their hearts beating a rhythm ancient as the land, a drum that calls them to witness the fragile moment where faith and fear collide. The candle flames flicker, shadows lengthen and recoil, and the chapel becomes a place suspended in liminal space where the living commune with the unseen, where the past and future entwine in a dance as old as human hope itself. Outside, the wind stirs once more, threading through the skeletal branches and rattling shuttered windows. The tolling bell fades into silence, but its echo remains, a resonant chord vibrating in the cold. It is a reminder that the village is a fragile haven, a place perched precariously on the edge of worlds where superstition is not folly but the very breath of survival. As the dawn deepens, the villagers slowly return to their homes, their movements tentative, weighed down by the lingering presence of what might be watching, waiting. The priest remains, the iron key cold and heavy in his palm, knowing that the ritual today is but one breath in a long struggle against forces that cannot be named without trembling. In the silence that follows, the village waits, held in a delicate balance between hope and despair, life and death. The bell's toll has spoken, but the true battle lies ahead, in shadows yet unseen and in hearts yet unbroken. The next chapter beckons, carrying with it the promise of deeper darkness, and with it the unyielding flicker of resilience that refuses to be extinguished. A heavy fog coils low over the frost-trimmed fields, wrapping the earth in a shroud of silence, so thick it seems to swallow sound itself. It presses cold against the backs of the few who linger at the village's edge, a damp breath that steals color from the world and dims the sharp outlines of familiar shapes. There, near an ancient stone, well cracked by seasons of frost and neglect, a woman kneels alone. Her fingers move with a delicate urgency, unraveling a thread so faded it could vanish between her trembling hands. The thread is tied tightly around a worn leather pouch, its surface scuffed and softened by time, by worry, and by countless prayers whispered in shadowed corners. The air clings with the scent of wet moss, iron rust, and smoke trailing thin and blue from distant hearthseach, a fragile flame in the gathering dusk. This thread, woven with blessings, half-spoken and curses muttered low, holds the weight of the village's survival. It is a tether strung between the worlds of the living and the dead, a fragile barrier woven by those who know too well the hungry silence waiting just beyond the edge of sight. Her eyes, hollow and darkened by sleepless nights and the relentless gnaw of dread, flicker toward the forest's distant border, black mass, heavy with the patient hunger of winter, waiting to swallow what little remains. Around her, the village breathes in uneasy stillness. Doors are barred against more than just cold. Roofs bow under snow that muffles footsteps and silences voices, while shadows gather thick beneath eaves and in narrow alleyways. Superstition is no idle fancy here. It is a chain forged by centuries, each knot a desperate prayer bound in fear, protection against plague that steals breath and hope, famine that gnaws at empty bellies, and the unseen curses that poison the earth and spirit alike. The villagers carry their rituals like armor, clutching talismans wrought from bone, iron, and ash. These objects are silent witnesses to countless nights spent watching, waiting, guarding fragile boundaries between light and dark. A sharp, sudden caw slices through the quiet, the harsh cry of a crow cutting the pale sky like a blade. Its wings beat a slow rhythm overhead, black against the gray, a living omen circling the village's fragile heart. The bird's call is a reminder, cold and unyielding. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. The forest beyond is not merely wood and stone. It is a place of restless spirits and forgotten debts, where ancient rites hold back the tide of chaos, but never fully. Each thread, each charm, each whispered word is a fragile defense against the shadows that stretch. Long and cold, the woman tightens the thread, her breath a thin mist that dissolves quickly into the chill air. The pouch is close against her chest now, a small fortress of secrets and old power. In her mind, the faces of those she protects flicker a child's soft sob, a mother's hollow eyes, the weary nod of an elder who remembers darker times. They are bound together not just by blood or soil, but by the shared weight of survival in a world where death lingers at the doorstep, waiting to cross the threshold. The village is a fragile island in a sea of shadow, held fast by these fragile rituals spun from fear and faith. As the fog thickens, swallowing the edges of the village whole, the woman rises slowly, her movements cautious as she treads the frozen ground. Every footstep is a prayer, every glance cast over her shoulder, a reminder that the unseen watches, always patient, always hungry. The village's ancient rites offer no promises, only time bought against the inevitable, and a hope as thin and brittle as the thread slipping through her fingers. Behind her, the crow's call echoes once more, a mournful song that fades into the gathering dusk. It speaks of doors left ajar, of boundaries blurred between the living and the dead. The thread will hold for now, but beyond the village, in the darkened forest, something stirs. A silence waits, heavy as the snow, carrying the weight of ancient hunger and the certainty that all tethers will someday snap. The night draws close, and with it, the shadow of what comes next, when faith alone will not be enough to keep the darkness at bay. Within the stout, time-worn walls of a stone cottage, a single candle flickers, its pale light trembling against the shadows that clutch the corners like silent watchers. The air hangs thick with the scent of dried herbs, bitter roots crushed and hung to dry, their earthy bitterness mingling with the faint metallic tang of blood, fresh and raw, seeping slowly from a bandaged arm laid gently upon a scarred wooden table. Outside, the storm rages with a furious heart. Thunder rolls through the sky like the wrath of forgotten gods, shaking the thatch roof and rattling every shutter in the village. It is a night of violence and quiet desperation, where nature and fate seem to collide in a grim symphony. The healer's hands, knotted and scarred by years of toil and prayer, trace the lines of an ancient manuscript resting open before her. The vellum is curled and stained with age and countless hands, the faded ink, a language older than memory, written in Latin prayers and remedies passed down through secret whispers. Her voice is low and steady, murmuring incantations that drift through the cottage like a fragile shield, a spell woven from faith and fear to hold back the creeping darkness, plague, and superstition, entwined like two serpents coiled around the village's fragile heart. Outside, the village leans heavily on her, not simply as a dispenser of herbs and poultices, but as a guardian of hope. They come bearing their ailments, yes, but also talismans, a rabbit's foot dangling above the door, a rusty horseshoe resting mute by the hearth, tokens of desperate faith meant to ward off unseen terrors. These objects hold no power alone, but in the weaving of whispered prayers and ancient rites, they form a tapestry of fragile protection. Every root, every leaf crushed in her careful hands is both medicine and magic, a line walked between science and superstition, where life is a thread pulled taut against the ever-present shadow of death. Her eyes flicker briefly to the window where the storm lashes at the world outside, rain beating a tattoo against the glass, and lightning splinters the sky into jagged white scars. Each flash reveals the outlines of houses huddled under the weight of fear and hunger, their windows dark or dimly lit with trembling candle flames. The villagers watch and wait, wrapped in their own prayers and superstitions, knowing that every breath is borrowed, every moment a fragile truce won through whispered invocations and the slow, tireless work of this woman who stands between them and oblivion. The bandaged arm on the table trembles, a subtle shudder of pain or hope. It belongs to a man whose name is spoken in hushed tones, a farmer who once tended the fields with calloused hands, but now lies caught in the merciless grasp of sickness and shadow. The healer leans close, her lips parting in a silent prayer as she presses a poultice to the wound. The smell of crushed sage and bitter bark rising like a balm against the cold fear that has seeped into the bones of the village. Outside, the wind howls its mournful song, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. Threading through the trees like a warning whispered by the very forest that surrounds them. This is a world balanced on the edge of ruin, where science is fledgling and magic is real, where every whispered charm holds the weight of survival and every shadow might hide the specter of death. The healer's sanctuary is a fragile beacon, flickering and uncertain, but unwavering in the face of the dark that creeps closer each day. Her voice rises softly in Latin again, the prayers wrapping around the room like the smoke from a dying fire. The rhythm is steady, an ancient heartbeat pulsing beneath the silence, grounding those who listen in something older and deeper than fear. The manuscript's ink blurs in the flickering light, its words like an echo of hope and dread, intertwined a guide for those who dare to hold back the darkness, even as it gnaws at the edges of their world. As the storm begins to ease, leaving behind a cold hush and the scent of wet stone and moss, the healer closes the manuscript with reverence. Her hands linger for a moment on the cover, rough and worn, like the life she has lived, before she turns toward the hearth. The fire burns low, its glow casting flickering shadows that dance across the walls, mirroring the uncertain light flickering in the eyes of the sick and the scared. In this fragile moment between breath and prayer, between medicine and magic, the village clings to the slender hope she offers. Yet beneath that hope lies the quiet truth: life and death hang poised on a knife's edge, each breath a battle fought in the dim corridors of shadow and silence. The healer knows this balance will never hold forever. Outside, the world waits, relentless and hungry, a force older than faith or fear. And soon the village must face what comes when even prayers cannot hold back the dark. The fire flickers once more, and in its glow, the healer's gaze turns toward the door, not as a threat, but as a passage. What lies beyond the walls of her sanctuary is a world shaped by superstition and survival, where every cure is a gamble and every charm a last hope. As dawn breaks, bringing a pale light to the cold stones, the fragile thread between life and death tightens, and the next chapter of this struggle begins. The market square lies abandoned beneath a sky swollen with bruised storm clouds, the cold wind sweeping through narrow streets once thick with the chatter of trade and the scent of ripe fruit and spilled ale. Now the air is sharp and biting, carrying only the faint stench of rot and the lingering whisper of loss. Shuttered stalls stand like silent sentinels, their faded paint peeling, their wooden bones cracked and splintered by years of harsh seasons and harsher times. A lone figure moves between them, dragging a basket lined with straw and scattered bones, the brittle remains of livestock long surrendered to hunger and despair. From behind darkened windows, villagers peer with eyes hollowed by suspicion and shadowed by whispered prayers. Their faces are maps of weariness and fear, carved by months of hardship where trust has become a scarce currency. The streets hold their breath, For this is the hour when superstition rises from the depths like a restless spirit, when hunger gnaws not only at empty bellies, but at the fragile threads of reason. And the old laws, those etched in stone and scripture, bend beneath the weight of silent desperation. Here, in this twilight of belief and dread, secrets are the coin of survival. Exchanged in the guarded silence between glances, the figure pauses beneath a crooked wooden cross, its surface scarred and worn, hanging askew as if bowing beneath the burden of countless prayers unanswered. Fingers, rough and stained with earth and toil, slip beneath a heavy cloak to reveal a small glass vial sealed tight with wax. Inside, a dark liquid swirls a potion brewed from nightshades, deadly petals, and ruse bitter leaves, a talisman against the evil eye, the curse whispered in the shadows and feared in the flicker of every candle flame. This vial is both weapon and shield, a desperate charm in a world where unseen eyes watch and judge with merciless certainty. Every glance cast in the square is a silent accusation. Every shadow, a whispered reminder of curses spoken and sins long buried beneath frozen soil. The market itself seems to breathe with a tension as thick and suffocating as the fog that creeps in from the river beyond, its fingers curling like grasping roots beneath the surface. Belief and fear are entwined here, indistinguishable in their embrace, feeding a hunger not just for food, but for hope, for power, for reprieve from the invisible forces that stalk the living. The basket shifts against the rough cobbles, bones clattering softly like a quiet tolling bell. These tokens of a cruel season's toll are both sacrifice and warning, reminders of what has been lost and what might yet fall. Around the edges of the square, shuttered doors and curtained windows guard the fragile lives within within each family a fortress of whispered prayers and hastily drawn charms. The old rites persist in trembling hands and muttered words, fragile threads spun from desperation, binding the village to an ancient, unyielding fear. The figure draws a deep breath, the cold air biting at lungs worn thin by months of hunger and sleepless nights. Eyes narrow beneath the hood as the storm gathers strength, thunder rolling low and slow like the voice of the earth mourning its children. In this charged silence, the market becomes a crucible, a place where the boundaries between the seen and unseen blur, where survival demands more than strength, where the price is paid in secrets, in silence, in sacrifice. As the first fat drops of rain begin to fall, the figure moves on, swallowed by the darkened alleys and the gathering night. Behind them, the crooked cross creaks in the wind, a sentinel to the fragile faith that holds the village poised between despair and hope. The market square waits in uneasy stillness, its shadows deepening like the roots of ancient trees, and somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls soft, mournful, a reminder that even in darkness, the march of time and fate never ceases. The storm will pass, but the hunger will remain. The unseen eyes will continue to watch, and the ancient, tangled roots of superstition will twist ever tighter around the hearts of those who dare to linger in the market of shadows. A bell tolls slowly from the church tower, its hollow voice drifting across the village as twilight's chill seeps into every corner. The sound hangs heavy, each strike stretching through the cold air like a slow pulse, marking time for those who linger between day and night, between hope and despair. Around the village, the scent of burning wax mingles with damp wolfa, faint fragrance of tallow candles flickering in darkened homes, and threadbare blankets wrapped tightly around restless children whose dreams are stitched with fear and silence. The churchyard lies just beyond the cluster of timber-framed houses, a quiet field shrouded in mist and memory. Rows of weathered crosses lean like tired sentinels, their stone faces worn smooth by years of rain and endless grief. Each cross tells a story, names forgotten by many, but etched forever in the soil. Beneath the frost and moss, a mother kneels among them, fingers trembling as they brush the cold surface of a stone worn pail by tears and time. Her whispered prayer drifts like a fragile breath, a desperate hope cast into the fading light for a child taken too soon, for a life snuffed out before it could fully bloom. Around her, the village is wrapped tight in superstition, a cloak woven from countless stories passed down in hushed voices, stales of spirits that wander the night, of curses laid by jealous neighbors or dark magic born in fear. Shadows twist and lengthen with the falling dusk, becoming more than mere absence of light, seeming instead to hold secrets and watchers unseen. The wind carries the faintest thread of an ancient sangha, lullaby half remembered, sung long ago, in times when exile and loss were as common as the changing seasons. This melody weaves between the stones and seeps into the silent hearts of those who remain, a haunting reminder of what has been lost and what still lingers just beyond sight. Faith, here is a fragile lantern, flickering uncertainly in the gathering dark, its flame wavering but defiant. In this place, suspended between worlds, the living and the dead, the known and the unknowably, is both shield and burden. The villagers clutch their prayers tightly, weaving rituals into their days and nights to hold back the creeping cold of despair. Holy water splashed at thresholds, crosses carved into doorposts, herbs hung in windows, all are threads in a delicate tapestry meant to bind safety and stave off the encroaching dread. But the night breathes with secrets, and the churchyard's shadows grow long. Beneath the cracked stones, beneath the earth itself, the veil between the worlds thins and shivers. The mother's prayer fades into silence, swallowed by the chill that seeps from the ground, as if the earth itself remembers each soul claimed, each promise broken by fate's cruel hand. Her fingers linger a moment longer, tracing the invisible line that separates hope from mourning, before she rises to rejoin the village's whispered vigil. The wind swells, carrying the lullaby once more, a plaintive song that speaks of exile, not just from lands, but from life itself. The bell tolls again, slower now, marking the passage of time as the last light dies on the horizon. The villagers retreat behind shuttered windows, hearts heavy with the weight of unspoken fears and fragile faith. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls a lone voice in the growing dark, echoing the sorrow of those who stand between worlds, holding on to the flickering flame of belief, uncertain if it will guide them through the night or fade into shadow as the night deepens. The churchyard holds its silence once more, a quiet witness to the thin line all must walk between life and death, between hope and despair, between the seen and the unseen. And in this stillness, a question lingers. When the lantern finally dims, what will remain for those left behind? to carry into the coming dawn. The hearth's weak glow struggles against the heavy dusk that folds over the village, swallowing the fading light like a shroud. Smoke and ash mingle with the brittle sting of winter's breath, swirling through narrow alleys where wooden crosses lean crooked against the gray sky, their splintered arms stained by years of grief and whispered prayers. A solitary figure moves quietly, her cloak drawn tight against the cold, footsteps soft on the frozen earth as she carries a fragile bundle wrapped in threadbare cloth. This offering, small and worn, is more than mere sustenance, is a plea. Two unseen forces that govern the fragile boundary between life and death. A desperate hope cast into the gathering shadows. The village seems held in a fragile stillness, caught in a breathless moment, suspended between day and night, survival and surrender. The chapel bell tolls in the distance, its hollow voice marking the passage of time with a solemn inevitability. Each ring echoes through the fog-draped streets, a reminder that another day slips away beneath the weight of fear and faith. Her steps are muffled by the thickening mist, a ghost among ghosts moving through a place haunted by superstition and sorrow. Every hidden charm beneath the folds of her cloak, every whispered prayer caught by the cold wind, is woven from threads of desperate belief armor, forged not from steel, but from fragile hope. Faith here is a double-edged blade, both shield and chain. It binds the villagers to a world seen and unseen, where the invisible watchers hold sway in the spaces between flickering candlelight and the dark edges of memory. In these long, cold nights, superstition is survival, a fortress built of silence and ritual that guards against the creeping dread beyond the hearth. The air trembles with tension, the quiet rustle of fabric, the faint crackle of burning tallow, the slow, steady pulse of the baylal, echoing the ancient dance of fear and faith that governs this fragile existence. In the hush before darkness claims the village, the boundaries between the living and the dead blur like smoke drifting through cold air. Eyes unseen observe from shadowed corners and cracked shutters the silent watchers whose presence is felt in the sudden gust that snuffs a candle or the chill that seeps beneath closed doors. The woman pauses beneath a crooked cross, the wood rough and worn beneath her fingers, her breath shallow in the biting cold. She places her offering carefully on the frozen earthen act of quiet defiance, a fragile thread woven between worlds. As night descends fully, the village holds its breath beneath a sky heavy with stars hidden behind a veil of mist. The flickering lights in shuttered windows are tiny lanterns against the vast unknown, their glow fragile but defiant. Somewhere in the distance, the faint murmur of a prayer rises and falls like a fragile flame, struggling to stay alight in the encroaching dark. The silent watchers stir their presence, a reminder that here faith is never certain, and survival depends on the delicate balance between hope and fear. The cold night deepens, and the village retreats into shadows, wrapped in the fragile armor of belief, waiting for dawn that will bring new trials and whispered secrets. What will the coming day hold for those bound by superstition's heavy chain? Only the silent watchers know, their eyes fixed beyond the horizon where the boundary between worlds waits, thin and trembling, ready to claim what is owed.